coffee earlier. Okay, welcome. So can always tell when it's a move into stillness meeting because about 1/3 as many people show up. Because people think that sounds weird or something, or that sounds, what, I don't know, you know, I'd really be interested in knowing what it is about these meetings that's so intimidating. I think I know what it is, because here's the thing. Well, I'm always suggesting this, but I think it's easier to think that that I don't really mean it other times. But here, when we're looking at what we can actually discover directly and begin to work with. See, people don't want to work. They want to sit back and they want to be entertained. And I get it. Who doesn't? But really here, the invitation is to do a little work, but it's to do the work in a very different way. It's to do the work in a way that is absolutely opposite to how we're working most of the time. And that's the hilarious thing about this. The big punchline is that we're already working really hard, all unconsciously. And we perceive that as misery, suffering, unhappiness, depression, anxiety, frustration, etc. And we really want, I think deep down, we really, really, really want something to be different. We really do. I don't think we're inauthentic in that sense. I think we're 100% authentic. We really just in our most intimate moments, in our darkest moments, we know what our prayer is. You know, it's please help. I want something better. I want something better. I really deeply want something better than what it is that I'm experiencing, right? But we're cynical, we're hardened, so that we actually don't really, no longer do we really kind of believe that that even is possible. We want it so badly with all of our soul. It's why we're here, you know, it's our purpose, is why it is that unique spark of what it is to be individuated. That's what we desire. But we've got a really, really bad case of sour grapes, you know, where we're just like, I tried, and it didn't work. And I got hurt. And so I don't think it's possible. I think it's all just a lie. Well, you can believe that up until the moment when you actually come face to face with the reality that you are doing your own suffering. See, when you discover I am doing my own suffering, it's a whole other game. Now it's not, how can I just get through and protect myself? It's, holy cow, how can I become aware and take responsibility? Because that's what I want. That's what I want so much. I just didn't think that I could do it, but now I'm seeing that it's possible. So what, now the sky's the limit. Okay. I mean, that's the amazing thing about this, is that this work, a somatic inquiry, a somatic exploration to discover what it is to be a Soma, which we'll talk about a little bit today, but to begin to discover what that is, and that that's real, and that it's something that is available to you, and that it is the fulfillment of so many of your desires. It's a magnificent thing, in my opinion, obviously. I mean, that's why I'm passionate about sharing it. So what does it mean? What is a Soma? What is that? That's a strange idea. We don't we don't know what that is, right? I mean, we kind of know what a body is, and we kind of have a sense that we know what a mind is, right? I mean, we're not always so crystal clear on these things, but we kind of have a kind of a sense, right? I kind of know what a body is. I kind of know what a mind is. We even say, well, I kind of know what maybe a spirit or a soul is even, or at least I know what it is to have passion, to be inspired, right? That like maybe that's what the soul is that inspired passion, that that in intense joy for life. That's it's like we don't have in American English, we don't have I don't think really an expression along those lines, but I think that kind of expression, I think is like, in, I don't know if it's Yiddish or Hebrew, but l'chaim, I think kind of expresses something of that. And in French, there's the joie de vivre or something like that. We don't really have that in American English. Maybe in British English you have something like that. I don't know, but we don't, that I'm aware of. Well, we make the mistake of thinking that we are not affected by our culture, but hello, everything that you are perceiving is in fact your culture. It's the culture that you have. The human nervous system is so remarkably adaptable. Consider that humans, I mean, maybe there are some other species that are, I'm not sure. I don't think any species on their own is as adaptable as a human. I'm pretty sure, just if you look at how on this planet, where humans are, how diverse they are, how diversely they express. Consider there's like, Maasai in Africa who are like living outdoors on the savannah. I don't know all the details, but something of this sort, and mostly naked and herding cattle and then slaughtering them and drinking their blood. Like that exists, and I exist. You see, and every other extreme that there is in the human expression. That's how adaptable we are. It's absolutely amazing. So this, what you would consider to be your life, what I would consider to be my life, it is what we are perceiving and calling my life. It is actually simply one's own perception. It is your own enculturation. And we are struggling with that. Do you see? You're in your life, you're struggling with that. You're struggling with that enculturation. You're struggling with like the ideas that you have. We think that we're struggling in some other way. We think that we're struggling with the body. We think that we're struggling with the mind. We're not struggling with these things. We think we're struggling with the emotions. No, we're struggling with the ideas, the enculturation, the models that we take to be reality. You see, we think that the model that is the culture, which is we perceive as a kind of oppression on us, and rightly so, in a sense, because it's so heavy, because we wear it so heavily, because we are so burdened by it, we take that on. So in somatics, we are discovering that there is another way, and that so we were locked into something. We were locked into one particular way of perceiving, and we took that to be the totality of reality. And all we know in that is I'm feeling bad, really, but we don't know why we're feeling bad. So we've got all kinds of speculative ideas. Well, It probably is because of how I was raised. It's or probably because I was beaten, probably because of that abusive relationship, probably because of how a teacher treated me, probably because of how my parents gave preferential treatment to my sibling, or probably on and on. Probably because I had that fall, and I had that fall, and it just makes sense then for the rest of my life, I'm going to be broken. We have all of these speculative notions to justify feeling bad. But notice that none of those speculative notions have actually panned out. They haven't really helped us to feel better. All they've done is justified us in feeling bad. This is why I say we're working so hard all the time to maintain the status quo, because that status quo is all of the speculative notions that are part and parcel of that enculturation, which we accept en masse unquestioningly. But you look, and this is why Hannah, I think rightly so, was so made it was so important to him to reveal how this is particularly damaging in some myths more than others. Some myths are helpful to us, you see. That's part of like myths are a way of describing the parts of the enculturation, right? We don't know they're not true. They could be true, but we don't know that they are true either, right? We don't know. It could be true, it might not be true. And so that's why it's myth. It's not fiction, it's myth, it's a difference. So our enculturation is composed of mythology. Some of those myths they work. So this is saying, our conditioning. The conditioning is composed of mythology. This is why I would really like, I have a lot of ideas of things that I'd like to explore, maybe in another, we'll spin off a new segment, because I think looking at myth and looking at story, looking particularly at the themes that come up in folk tales that are sort of like universal motifs. They're talking to us about what it is to be, not just to be a particular, not just to be a Maasai or a Vermonter or a this or that, but to be human, because it shows up in all, or at least enough human cultures in their expression through story that we see this is speaking to something that is common among all humans, or at least enough humans that it's something that we might want to notice, because it's showing us something about how we are programmed, how we are conditioned. And it's actually revealing to us, when we see it in this way, that there is another possibility beyond that limit that was imposed by the culture. So that culture is not bad. It's here in support of us. It is us. It is our expression. But we thought that we were victims of it. So how this world teaches us to deal with it, at least at present. I mean, probably not in all times and in all cultures, because this actually turns out not to be true as far as I can tell, but certainly here in this culture where we can meet on Zoom, anybody who has access to Zoom or YouTube, in that culture, there are some things that we want to start to be aware of, because they're not working very well for us. And so discovering them, that's the first step, is you have to realize that this is even going on. Now, when you realize it, and many of you have had this experience repeatedly, you discover, oh, I was doing that. Now, when you have that discovery, it's like, oh, it's news and it's not news at the same time, because you were always aware of it. Always, 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 always. You just had a different story about it. All of a sudden, you wake up to it as it is, rather than having a particular story that you are attached to. This is what's essential for somatic exploration, is we have to make that shift so that we're going to this sort of neutral orientation as regards the body, as regards the personality, as regards the mind, okay? We're not saying that it doesn't exist. We're not saying that it's good. We're not saying that it's bad. We're not saying anything. We're not taking a position regarding that. We're just simply observing and noticing that actually this body and this mind that we've been so concerned about up to this moment, we come to realize that actually in reality, we don't give a damn about them. Sorry to be so explicit about it. That's not where we should be placing our concern. Every time we do that, we're putting the cart before the horse. And why is nothing working? Because we've got it all wrong. We're so concerned about how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to fix that relationship? How am I going to make this body work? How am I going to make myself feel better? You're not going to make yourself feel better. Sorry, no, you're going to feel better. Then everything else sorts itself out. And you have to see why this is so, because it's an energy game. We are playing an energy game. You have an ability to be, let's say, a channel, a conduit for an enormous amount of energy. Enormous, absolutely enormous. You can't even imagine it. And it's not only that, but it's here. Like it's expressing even physically in this body all the time, enormous amounts of energy for everyone. Even anybody who's not yet dead, that's like, it's keeping this organism going. It's an enormous amount of energy. And just beyond, but that's just like baseline in order just to not be dead. And that's kind of the standard for care in most parts of in anybody who has access to this culture's standard of care is very, very low. It's just like, of course you're feeling bad because that's just what happens. Like you're just meant to feel bad. Nobody feels good. Get with the program. But that if governments really recognized what a enormous burden that places on society. Think about this. Anybody who is presently or has ever been chronically ill, where you started to notice that you actually were withdrawing from your life. You were saying, no, I can't do that anymore. And you have reasons why. Because why? That mental model, that enculturation is getting heavier. You're taking on more of it. You're saying, oh God, yeah, that's all true too. Life is just suffering and we're just going to have to get through it, just slog through it like everybody else, and don't be so miserable about it, except that that's just what makes you more miserable. So how much, like, you want people who are productive? Well, that's not a good way to go about it, is it? If you've got everybody believing in this myth that you're on, it's an inevitable decline. And it was not good to begin with. I mean, you look at how so many of the mythologies can be understood in different ways, but the way we understand it is revealing of the level of consciousness. So you take like the Hebrew mythology, okay, Judeo-Christian creation mythology, and there you can understand this. You can understand it at an esoteric level, in which it's like very life affirming, very empowering, because it's revealing how creation happens. It's showing you within your own self how creation is happening. So it can be understood that way, but look at the popular understanding. The popular understanding of that is, well, there, it's the Garden of Eden, it was paradise. Original sin screwed us all. That's why we just have to suffer. You see, like that's how it's understood. But what actually it's revealing to us is that come back here to that original sin. Stop making this original mistake. You see, that's what the sin is. The sin is the error. It was just, you see, it's at a fundamental level. I'm choosing to perceive that I am a body and a mind, and that I have to maintain this. And when I make that, I'm saying no to happiness. I'm saying no to peace. Because I am investing myself almost exclusively in a lower energy level in which there's less of a less connectivity, less broad awareness. And so it's very myopic to be perceiving oneself as a body and a mind, because the body and the mind are coming and going. So then it's like, I'm coming and going. Oh my God, I'm not, you're never going to feel safe until you choose the feeling of safety. So this is what somatic exploration offers us, is that, and this is taking a lot of time with this because it's so fundamental. This will give you such a, when you understand this gives you such a shortcut. It helps you to whittle away so much that is unnecessary. So it's about learning to actually start to perceive yourself and remain invested, not as a body and a mind, not to reject them either. Let's be clear about this. We're not saying that we're not negating them. We're not denigrating them. We're not devaluing them. This body and mind are a blessed gift. So I'm not suggesting otherwise. Like there is this body and mind are no less divine than anything. But it's to recognize that there does exist a hierarchy. That you are not apart from that hierarchy is you expressed. That hierarchy is in you. It is you expressed. You're not something in the hierarchy. You are that hierarchy expressing. And so within this, we want to recognize, well, it's just simply more profitable, less energy expenditure, less unwanted side effects if I just start to experience life as a soma rather than what I'm familiar with, which is trying to navigate by means of body and mind. Body and mind are a grosser level expression of the soma. Okay, so the soma is a higher level of consciousness than is the body and mind. It's not to say that body consciousness and mind consciousness are bad. But think about this. You appreciate having body and mind consciousness. That's your vehicle for expression, right? That's how you experience your life. You don't have an experience of your life in the same way, right? It's not as real to you. It's not as interesting to you. It's not as meaningful to you unless you can experience it with the body and the mind. Think about it. If all you had was a body, but not a mind, you didn't have any mind consciousness, you had body consciousness. Do you think, I mean, it's hard to know, but you could imagine that and just to kind of speculate, do you think you would prefer that experience or the experience of both having awareness of both body and mind? Now, even if your thoughts tend to be very dark and negative and unpleasant, probably you would say, yeah, but I actually think, no, I'm pretty sure I prefer the experience with mind. It's more interesting. It's more, something about it is more, seems more real. Do you see what I'm saying? Like this experience that is being created presently, this sensorial experience, this experience of body and mind, experiencing through body and mind. This experience is what we're seeking. We're seeking an experience of 3 dimension of time, right? So 4 dimensions, the 3 spatial dimensions, right? I want to feel, think about it. If you could never get up, if you could only lie down, would life be as interesting to you, do you think? Obviously not. You want to be able to get up. We all have that desire. It's part of what it is to be human. So you have this desire to experience this vertical dimension. Well, so that's pretty interesting. But then you start to think, okay, but maybe there's more than this, maybe like, this is interesting. This is like before there was 0 dimensions. There was no dimensionality. Now we all can experience this. That 0 dimensionality is always, it hasn't disappeared. It's still here. Everything else arises from it. So 0 dimensions is pure awareness, devoid of content, simply being, but not being something. Simply being, pure awareness, formless awareness, 0 dimensions. But then from that arises is 1 dimension, verticality. This is very interesting. All of a sudden there's a sense of something, right? 0 dimensions, nothing. 1 dimension, something. So you can really notice that, that desire to be upright is a desire to be something. If you're just lying on your back all the time, you don't really have a sense of yourself as something in the same way that you have a sense of yourself as something when you can sit up. So this is like, it's basically one of the earliest things that, or not the earliest things, but it's one of the, let's say it's maybe the first significant milestone of movement for a human infant that signifies a kind of real individuation. Prior to that, they don't really have a place in the world so much. I mean, like, people come to them, but the tendency, they're like peering over, looking down at. So from that, you think about what that is. You could imagine that, or maybe you could even just take a moment and experience that, to lie on the back, and you notice what that experience is, what your experience of the world. The world is just sort of like, if you're lying on your back, you don't even really have the sense, there's no horizon. Things aren't approaching you. You don't have a sense of distance. It's sort of like flat, and things kind of come in and go out. There's like, at a certain point, there's a development to be able to turn the head, rotate the head, but there are limits to that prevent really seeing too much of any horizon or any approach. You just start to get the hints of it. Well, of course, then you're going to start to be interested, right? So that's what kind of encourages this, okay, I want to get up. So you start to get up. Interestingly, I think oftentimes often, how does the child, I'm trying to remember how babies do that. I guess they employ various strategies. I mean, oftentimes they'll just have the parent do it. Like, baby wants to do it, parent wants the baby to do it, some combination of those things, and then the baby's put upright. But you can see how all of those little things, these early learnings of movement, completely enculturate us so that we the unique expression through this system becomes, it starts to behave and appear in a very particular way, right? So you look at yourself and you notice that you just have certain ways of being. You have certain postures that you regularly inhabit, but you don't really experience other postures that much. In fact, if you really start to observe, you'll notice you almost never experience other postures. You really just stay, you've got these sets, these pretty clunky sets of movement patterns that have been serviceable enough, but that over time, the inefficiencies of them have started to really be a drag. You know, like that's the thing, is that, again, all of the enculturation, it's imprinting movement patterns, holding patterns, postural patterns, ways of perceiving oneself. Notice it's the perception, though, is at the level of a body. So we start to form a mental model of the body. And this mental model, we're not doing it consciously, but you can start to notice that it's there. You have a sense of yourself. It's called proprioception. It has a technical fancy name, but you have a sense of yourself in space. So once all of these dimensions come online, and we won't belabor the point anymore, but it's like you start to notice, okay, now you want to be able to move. I'll fill them out just briefly. You want to move forward. You want to be able to move forward in space now. You're sitting up, but now you want to move forward in space. Well, to move forward in space, so it's second dimension. Now, think about what is involved in that. Now all of a sudden, this whole new dimension opens up to you. Think about it, like what new things are available to you you never even imagined, could not even have entered your mind until you had that first necessary experience of discovering verticality. Only then are you going to say, oh, like I start to have this experience of not just being upright, but being able to move forward and backward. You see, so rocking is a very, very basic human movement. It's a nice one to practice. It's very good to practice. You can practice just while you're sitting, like I'm demonstrating, just rocking forward and backward. You can then, if you want to progress that, when you have a sense of competency, I mean, you can, by the way, you could do it sitting in a chair, you could do it sitting on the floor. There are many variations, and you want to start to, once you get a sense of the basic movement, then you can progress it and try different variations. You try, you did sitting on the chair, you try maybe sitting on a shorter chair. Maybe you try it sitting on a stack of books. Maybe you try it sitting cross-legged. Maybe you try it sitting with your legs out in a V. Maybe you try it with your legs straight forward. You try it kneeling, sitting on your heels. Try it kneeling so that your hips are above your knees. Try it on all fours. So then on all fours, there are a lot of variations. So I'm giving you this is like how to do it. This is how you can start to really play with this, so that you start to rediscover things that you had forgotten were ever there. Things that when they come back to you, you're like, wow, I vaguely remembered that was there. I vaguely remembered that possibility that I had experienced, but I'd been so closed off for so long, I didn't even know. And it's not just a movement, it's the movement. Yes, the fluidity of the movement, the ease of movement, the sense of competence and confidence. And by the way, I want to also, like all these examples that I just gave of how to progress that particular movement, I understand that that particular progression was all making a lot of assumptions about a person's abilities. So we're all starting from a certain level of ability. That level of ability is so low that we would even, you consider that when you live in a culture in which the standard is set so very low, and then even within that very low standard for what's healthy and possible, even within that, they even acknowledge that way down, even way less functional, they call that disabled. And disabled is a thing. Notice, it's like where we have, as a culture, we're all saying, oh, it's just inevitable. There's no other possibility. That's just, oh gosh, what a tragedy. That's just how that is. Without acknowledging the tremendous limits of our knowledge, I mean, like without how about instead we open to a greater possibility and a greater mystery than that? And then we start to open to looking at what's possible, not what is likely, not what is normal, not what is average, not what limitations people within that paradigm are telling us are the truth. But we start to look to what's possible, and we start to realize that something much greater is possible, much, much greater. And we know it's true because if only one person demonstrates it, it's proof positive. Because we are all in a very essential way about what it is to be human. We are all the same. Every single one of us, we are all the same at that very essential level. All of the rest of it is our particular enculturation. That is malleable, you see, and that's within your power. So even if you classify yourself as disabled, and to some degree we all do, we fall somewhere on that spectrum, and we all accept it and justify it. You notice, it's like you say to yourself or to others, just start to observe how you excuse your limitations. You'll start to see that you actually are putting a tremendous amount of effort into that. And the reason why is because you're afraid, because you don't believe, and this is the cynical nature of the broad culture that we live in. So it's not our fault that this is how we learn to understand and perceive and react. But that cynicism forms, and it says, there's just nothing better available. And it just starts to put the blinders on, ignore all evidence to the contrary. Any exception is to be ignored. That's, you notice, like in statistics, they're like a lot of what we consider to be possible, because of the nature of the techno culture we live in, the scientists, I would call it pseudoscientific, honestly. They're not true to their own selves. They don't even know their own religion. They really don't. If they understood their own religion, they would know that that's not what science is. But what passes for science, they're so obsessed with the norm. They say anything that's too far out of that, it's just some anomaly. We can't count on that. all we can count on is what clusters around this imaginary curve that we're putting here on our chart. But there are so many outliers. And the curve is, hey, guess what? It's a constellation, right? You know, that's what they're seeing. They've made a chart, and that chart is like a myth that can be interpreted depending on your level of consciousness that you're approaching it from. And if you're approaching it at a low level of consciousness, you're going to see a constellation, because that constellation keeps you in the boundary. But through this kind of exploration, so you can start to modify, feel empowered to modify and start to explore. So like I said, all of those variations on rocking that I just gave, even if you say, I don't have any ability to feel my pelvis, much less move it, so this doesn't apply to me, I want you to know that it's just a spectrum, but you can modify for where you find yourself presently on that spectrum of ability. But please understand that your ability is not something that is fixed. It's not in stone because of something that happened in the past. That's the myth. That's the popular myth. That's the dominant myth. That's the myth of aging. That's the myth of decline. That's the myth of it's all shit to begin with, and it just goes downhill from there because of original sin. But the invitation is actually to look and see that's happening right now. It's not the past. Your experience right now has nothing to do with the past. It was learned in the past. I won't deny that. It was learned in the past. But presently, your experience has nothing to do with the past. It has only to do with what you're still doing that you learned in the past. That's it. What you're doing is what is producing that experience. Even so, you can discover, and this is the beauty of somatics, is you can discover how you are in an instant. Doesn't matter how long the problem has plagued you. It could be, it could be something you say, I'm 75 years old, and as far as I can remember, probably from the day I was born, if not before, this has been with me. This has been part of my enculturation. It's been weighing heavily on me, and it's been so painful, and I've been so powerless to it, and I'm so afraid of it and so terrified. But if it is caused by sensory motor amnesia, it doesn't matter that it's been there for 75 years and everything that you've tried didn't work and that you're terrified. None of that matters. All that matters is if it's somatic, then addressing it somatically will instantly, the instant that it is truly addressed fully, somatically, instantly cured. That's the power of it. It overcomes the past by revealing that the past is not, the past is a boogeyman. It's the boogeyman that we've been using. And you look at what the holding patterns are, what we're doing all the time that we're not aware of, the ways in which we're tight on one side, we're leaning in some way, we're clenching our jaw, we've got our tongue pushed in weird ways, and we're furrowing the brow, and we're hunching over, and our aches and pains and fatigue and all this stuff, and we're just thinking, God, well, I don't know what it is, it must be this, that my doctor told me this, my physical therapist told me that, and my shaman told me this other thing, and it's like everybody's telling you a different thing, but they're like the blind men and the elephant. They're very wise, but they're blind to the elephant. And the elephant is learn to experience life as Soma, which means that you just start to notice that whatever is happening, there's a movement. Okay? So then you just start to let that movement be. I had this brilliant idea of what we're going to explore today, but this is turning out to be how it is. So that's not happening. This is, but we want to start to just notice that feeling of the movement. Just start to notice the feeling of the movement and let yourself just be so intimate with that feeling of the movement. It doesn't have to be a big movement. It might be so subtle that you have to be really, really, really attentive and gentle to actually even notice it. And then maybe it gets bigger, or maybe it gets even smaller. But you start to just notice it, and then you just start to be really intimate with it, like you're dancing with it. So what's been going on, you see, is you start to realize that, wow, you've been holding yourself so tightly, so rigidly. You couldn't even feel, you were so numb, and the only places you could feel it just hurt. But as you just start to tune into this feeling of this movement, and you just really, you're dancing with it. So who's leading? Are you leading, or is it leading? And you kind of play with that. Maybe sometimes you lead a little bit, maybe you say, well, let's go, hey, we seem to have been going clockwise. Let's try counterclockwise or something like that. Sometimes you lead like that. Be real gentle though, because, you want it to be a smooth, pleasurable, enjoyable dance. So whoever's leading, there has to be so much intimacy that nothing's abrupt. Like you're totally synchronized. You're one with one another. You're very, very intimate with one another. You and your experience, you and the sensation. You're very, very intimate with it. And you start to notice, okay, sometimes you're leading, sometimes it's leading, and sometimes you're not even sure because it's just a dance happening. Okay. So you kind of but you don't want to get way too far off anywhere, right? Because if you get way too far off anywhere, you kind of you like get dizzy because you don't have competence there. So you just keep it just gentle, real gentle, very present, and you just notice there's this movement. It's maybe a sway, or it's maybe a bob, or it's maybe a wave, or it's maybe a shudder, or goodness knows what it is. It could be so many things. It could be it could even seem like a slump. It could even seem, so many possibilities, but you just be gentle with it. Don't do anything sudden. Don't do anything too big. It's a slow, smooth, gentle dance. And we don't know where we're going to end up. That's the beauty of it, because notice we're playing with time and space now. We're not letting time and space dictate to us what our constraints are. Rather, we're starting to play with time and space. So time and space, it's like, in a sense, we're dancing with time and space. Time and space is dancing with us. There's a dance taking place, but we can't be too, if we get too invested in one perspective or the other, we go off in a weird direction, and we don't really know. Then we're wobbly, or then we're too tight, we're too loose or too tight. We don't want to be too loose. We don't want to be too tight. We want to be buoyant. See, so one of, this verticality, so Thomas Hanna defined these 4 dimensions. I've already revealed to you what they were. It's not like mind-blowing to any of us necessarily, but you could let it be. You could let it be, because it's, you start to take it on, instead of just intellectually, you start to take it on somatically. You start to feel the experience that it's pointing to. You start to notice it. So he said, this first, this first movement into verticality is this wanting buoyancy. It's like ascension. It's like, it really is, in a sense, and like to be human is a particular experience. It is an experience of being very upright. We're quite different from other animal species in that regard. So this buoyancy is very, very important to us. It's important to all animals. I'm not saying it's less important. It's equally important. It's just pronounced in a particular way in humans because we're so upright. And so we are aligned, our spine is aligned differently relative to gravity than many other species, most other species. And so, that does have a very profound effect on how we experience, because we take it for granted. But see, because we take it for granted, we forget about it. And then we keep on taking on the myths of aging, the myths of deterioration, and we kind of slowly decline, so that we notice, stereotypical aging is a loss in height. And so that buoyancy is lowering. So you notice, what is the feeling of buoyancy? Well, actually, that feeling of buoyancy is the feeling of life as Soma, right? There's an intrinsic desire for buoyancy, that is to be alive, to be embodied. Involves buoyancy. That's why we're not collapsed on the ground. That's why we have a sense of being a Soma. A Soma has to have buoyancy. So that's why Hannah defined the four dimensions, including this verticality, having a face, a second dimension. So the face tells us which way is forward. We take it for granted, but see, it's built into, we can just know some things. It's amazing. Like there is a tremendous amount of diversity in human culture. It's, I think, a mistake to think that necessarily they're all equally, they're all equal. Okay, there are, I would say they're all probably equally dysfunctional, more or less, within a given tolerance, because to the degree that they continue to exist, you see, then they're obviously functional. But Hans Selye, who's the guy who defined what we now understand as stress, he also defined this. He was pretty serious scientist guy, but he's researching and looking at the results of, I think, doing a lot of animal studies. Creepy, but that's what they're doing. And he found, it didn't matter whether you liked the reason or you didn't like the reason, nothing mattered about it. There's what we would consider to be positive stress, and there's what we would consider to be negative stress. But whether it's positive or negative, meaning like positive stress would be, in a sense, like, you're getting married. You want to get married, but you're also wanting to have some big wedding that's very elaborate and, whatever. So then it's stressful. Like, I'm so excited about this day. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't wait for it to be over. So it's positive. But now if you just keep doing that, even if it's something that you think you want, like, like having kids, biggest stressor of my life. It pushes me to learn. That's the upside of stress, is that it encourages growth and learning. But when we don't have adequate confidence in our ability to meet the stress, to what's the word I'm looking for, to maintain a healthy balance in the nervous system, then basically, if I'm overwhelmed by my perceived demands, so that I don't have competence to do all of it, right? Because life as a Soma means that I am fully engaged, 100% engaged. I am so in this ultimate mindfulness. Seriously, it's like supreme mindfulness, where there's nothing about it that's a burden or a drag at all, because it's not you as a mind trying to be mindful. It's you as the Soma, simply being yourself. And naturally, life is a Soma. When you're attuned to the Soma, you're like, oh, I'm not liking that right there. Okay, I guess I gotta give that a little attention because I forgot something there. And you just give it the right attention, and you are familiar enough with that process. It's sort of like when your foot falls asleep and then it starts to come back to life. Unless it's really bad, you probably don't freak out so much. You're probably, wish I hadn't done that. I wish that wasn't happening. Oh, there it goes. Okay, there's that feeling. But you don't probably think that it's the end of the world. You probably don't think that you're dying, right? So it's sort of like we want to have at least that level of competence somatically. That's the minimum standard, but notice how far off we are from that. Because that minimum standard means that we're feeling good, like baseline. Our baseline is good. We wake up good. All things being equal in a day, we're continuing to feel good. We go to sleep, feel good, feeling good. We're feeling good. Can you imagine that? That's life as a Soma, though, because when you're attuned to the Soma, your main priority has nothing whatsoever to do with appearance, right? You don't care about appearance. That's not your concern. From the perspective of the Soma, I'm not saying you, of course you're concerned. I'm concerned. We have to, but that's the enculturation. But as the Soma, you start to note, you're starting to get discernment for what is a Soma. At first, you don't know. But you have to understand this word, Hannah didn't invent the word, but he started to use the word in this way to describe this, what he's talking about, because there is no other word in English. There may be a word in other languages. I don't know. But in English, we don't have a word. Or if we have a word that could be used for it, it's already also used for other things that are somewhat kind of the same, but not quite. So then it's confusing, right? Like soul, like could use that word, but then I don't know, there's a lot of baggage with that word. So we want to be clear. We want to say, okay, this is something that you actually is available to you. It's an experience, and you've got to start to get discernment to recognize it, because Hannah is saying, and Feldenkrais was saying, and Rolf was saying, and all of these people were saying, and I'm saying, and it's not just them. It's like Yogananda. It's can't even think of their names. Like the Krishnamacharya. Okay, it's like the modern yogis we know about, the like hatha yogis and the kriya yogis. Okay, it's not maybe it's not exactly the same, but it's hinting at the same thing. Or like the qigong Taoist masters and things of that, like, or this is kind of hinting at the same thing. I'm not a Taoist master, so I can't say for sure, because I don't know what exactly that experience is. They describe it. And so it's possible to discover it for yourself. That's the point, is they're saying, okay, here's a way, like here's a map. Follow this map in your own experience. You see, when what I'm sharing with you is that you want to like have some interesting experiences. You want to have experiences that might be like really pleasurable, that well, they're available to you. They're like, they've been codified. You have the key that unlocks the Tai Chi and the Qigong and the whatever, the various types of yoga. Without the key, you're perceiving it in the wrong way. You're perceiving it in a less effective way. You're perceiving it as a body and mind, which means you don't even know the assumptions that you're making that are hurting you. I'm talking to you as someone who did, like, I was a very ambitious yogi. Because, well, very ambitious, because it was like, I didn't have, I mean, there wasn't a lot to go on. And I didn't have somebody, when I was in my early 20s, I was doing hours of hatha yoga every day. Okay. And I could do things that looked sort of right. They looked right enough to the people who were teaching me that they didn't ever come over and say, well, buddy, that's totally wrong. So from all the feedback that I had available to me, I'm like, I guess I'm doing it. But if I had understood about life as Soma, that would have been totally different, because I actually hurt myself very badly, because of my ignorance doing yoga in my early 20s. Stuff that I'm still undoing, because it's no mistakes. See, I had and have a desire to really understand how to what is happening, specifically in regard to what is not working, because I know the pain of that. I know the intense suffering of that from my own experience, and I know how important it is to catch it early and do something about it. So it's like, okay, I've looked to so many people for the answers. I'm sure you have too. Looked to so many people, parents, teachers, doctors, accountants, lawyers, yoga teachers, meditation teachers, God, on and on. Massage therapists, homeopathists. It's remarkable. And what none of them had, or at least none of them knew how to describe, was what I'm telling you, that you learn to live life as a Soma. And that is the secret that unlocks everything else. Because when you go to all those people, I know what it's like. You go to them, you're so desperate. You're looking for the thing that's going to be the magic thing that's going to help you want to wake up in the morning. And they don't deliver that. It's not their fault. They don't know it. They don't have it to give. But we then probably often think, well, that didn't work. That's useless. That's how I've been. Oh, that was stupid. That didn't work. That was another thing that didn't work. How could there be so many things that don't work? Everybody out there is just a scam artist. Well, this thing, life is Soma, is the thing that unlocks it, so that you start to realize, no, many of these people are very, very sincere, and they're offering something tremendously valuable. It's just that you didn't have the basic ingredient to be able to even learn that. You couldn't even understand it because you had a very more basic need. that still wasn't addressed. And that basic need, and it's not addressed by this culture, so it's not your fault. And hardly anybody knows about it. That basic need is to live life as a Soma. And you can do that because you are not the body and the mind. That's, again, not to negate the body and mind. I'm not saying that they are not part of you, but they are not essential to you. And in the ultimate sense, neither is the Soma, but the Soma is essential to having a four-dimensional experience and beyond. So Soma is the essence, the very essence of what it is to be four-dimensional. And if you want, remember that you can maybe see the obvious progression here, but I'll just make it explicit in case it's not clear. We start at, zero dimension, well, then one dimension. Well, at zero dimension, we don't know about one dimension. Not, or it's like, it's the thing that it's kind of just vaguely there, just enough that we don't yet recognize it, but it starts to kind of, we feel it a little bit, and then we start to feel into it, and then it's all of a sudden it materializes. So it's a gradation, but you start to notice, okay, zero dimensionality, and then this movement to one dimensionality, and then there's a natural movement to, have a face and to be able to differentiate between forward and backward. So this is the movement in a second dimensionality. Then the third dimensionality is now I want to actually move places. I want to not just be fixed here. I want to actually be able to go all around. And so we, that's like that's now, then that, but in order to move all around, you got to also be able to move in time. So we're the experience of us being a Soma in its essence, what a Soma really is, and nothing more. The bare essence of it is simply four-dimensionality. And so to cultivate this skill, this is why we're here. Everything else that we're experiencing that we don't like, that's just revealing that we haven't mastered the fundamental lessons. Forget about anything else, because see the progression: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, what do you think? I mean, 5, right? I mean, don't have to be a brilliant person to see the pattern. So what's next? Well, 5D. But what is 5D? Well, guess what? You haven't mastered 4D. So that's not yet for you. It would be like as if if you're in 4th grade and you've got to learn certain things to go to 5th grade. Like, why? Is it arbitrary? No, it's because in 5th grade, they're going to assume that you already know things in 4th grade. Like, you're going to have learned a certain kind of level of reading in 4th grade that's expected of you when you enter 5th grade. If you go into 5th grade and you can't read at that 4th grade level, then they're going to say, we can't help you because you don't have the requisite knowledge for this. So that's the good news in all of this, is that keep it simple. You just notice the feeling, the experience of being 4D. And your calibration for that is simply to feel this sense of intimacy, of being in this dance, this very, very intimate dance all the time, so that you cease to fight against. See, because remember, one of the most essential things, not even the most essential beyond awareness itself, the most essential component a soma is that first dimension. You see, without first dimension, you can't have a second dimension. So that first dimension, which is that buoyancy. So if we are experiencing, which all of us are because we are enculturated in a particular way, if you experience any kind of decline in buoyancy through time, right? So we say, well, through time, I'm aging. Do you experience a decline in buoyancy? Do you feel more buoyant now versus 20 years ago? And most people will say, well, less buoyant. Okay, good. This is how you calibrate. You just notice what's my level of buoyancy. So last week, I know we're going long. I'll wrap it up very quickly. But last week we introduced this notion of the lightness of being. So the lightness of being is a pointer to the soma. So it's one way of pointing. It's just, so don't get hung up on that particular pointer. It's a useful pointer, but it's not the only one. So soma is, you don't think you know it. It's very important. Nobody knows it. I don't know it. Not with the mind. Not that one doesn't know it. Why? Because you have to understand, the soma is in this hierarchy. The soma is the essential four-dimensional individuation. So the mind and the body are sub parts of that. They exist under the umbrella and are one with, not separate from, the soma. See, so the soma is inclusive. The soma includes all of that, but it doesn't. Which one has greater, what has greatest awareness of the soma? You know, it's like asking, what has the greatest awareness of the elephant? And if we set it up in the wrong way, then we're leading. I barely even drank my coffee today. We're leading the witness in a sense, you know. So we're saying, if I say, who has the greatest awareness of the elephant among the blind men? Well, then, and for this, you have to know the blind men and the elephant story, but I've told it many times, so I hope you know it. If you don't, you can let me know. But the blind men, you know, the answer is none of the blind men know the elephant better than the elephant knows the elephant. So, but notice now that all of them, just to kind of put a finer point on it, all of them in that story, who knows them best, them or the one who is perceiving the story, the one who is doing the story, the one who is narrating the story, the one who is the level of consciousness that is present to the story? Well, obviously that one, because the story is, its reality is dependent upon the one who is aware and telling and narrating and actualizing it. And so this soma is that which is greater than and inclusive of all that is within its domain, which includes the mind and the body. So if we're consulting the mind and body to tell us about the soma, it's like we're asking blind men to tell us about the elephant, and it will give us something that is true, but it will be distorted, or exaggerated, or out of context, and thereby misleading. And that's why we end up in life like this. And nobody who's like this is thinking all day long, this is weird. They're not. They're thinking that's correct. And how do we get from here, you know, how do we get from here back to here in a really wonderful way? Well, somatically. Because if you do it any other way, you've tried those routes, the body and mind routes, you know where they lead you. They actually reinforce it. That's why, with rare exceptions, I would say where people already have a high enough level of somatic awareness and they just needed those other remedies. Sometimes that's true. But most people in this culture, most people, I would say, are suffering first and foremost from a somatic disorder, which is that they have lost awareness of themselves as a soma. They're so invested in the mental model, and they believe that they really believe all the limitations. That these are the limits. This is what's available to me. It's too late for me now. Too much water under the bridge. Those things happen in the past, and that's why things are the way they are. And the limitations are real because I know that they are, because I read that they are, because my doctor told me that they are, because my physical therapist told me that they are, because I read it in a textbook, because I learned it from my professors, because my parents also agree, and my children, who are all PhDs, also agree, and all civilized nations agree. Okay, argue for your limitation, and guess what? You can keep it, but you don't want it. And so life as Soma is a bold move, and you have to do it gently for that reason. Because if you are too forceful, then you can't handle the amount of energy that's coming online all at once. See, these parts have been numbed, they've been cut off because of the chronic tension. Literally, the nerve impulses were not going there, at least not in the same way. There was some kind of thing going on in that circuit that was revealing like overload, just like this is just meant as a stopgap measure, but we forgot that it was there. And we need to rediscover that. So you have to be gentle, because that energy, in a sense, you could say, even is trapped in the nervous system in these particular ways. And so as we open to life as Soma, we start to be that openness is reflected in the physicality, which allows for greater energy flow. So the sensory feedback starts to come, saying something, it's just like, what is this? And if it's just a little bit above the usual threshold, and if you've been primed correctly and you've practiced and everything, then you start to feel just that little bit as a, wow, this is great. I feel so much better. And I feel competent a little bit, like I feel like I am here and I have purpose and I can do something that I desire, and I am good. And I have good desires, you see, and life is good. You start to get a feel of that because you're no longer holding the habitual posture of fear and apprehension. That's just one example. That would be like a red light. Green light would have different words to describe it, different associations, but nonetheless, you just start to notice whatever it is, that there's some experience that was just like bound up just below the conscious threshold. And it would, as soon as you become aware of it consciously, it's like, oh yeah, that's always been there. That was the problem all along. Oh my goodness, what a relief. That's what happens. But on the other side of it, you were, if you ever became aware of it, it was only as, oh my God, that's just, oh, it hurts. So I'm afraid, I can't move. So notice that those beliefs that are there, like it hurts, like I'm injured, I can't move, I'm not safe, I'm falling apart, I'm declining, my doctor told me so, my bones are falling apart, all this stuff. You notice then how that actually, think about this, like if your bones are falling apart, you know what you need to do? You need to move because your bone, but in the right way, so that your bones are taking the load and not your muscles. If your bones are deteriorating, there's a very good chance. I mean, there may be other factors, obviously, nutritional and otherwise, but there's a very good chance that at a minimum, a contributing factor is that the muscles are chronically taking on this load that they're not intended for. So you're gonna hurt, you're gonna be disabled, and your bones are gonna be crumbling. It's a 2-for-1 special, except it's the worst kind. And then the culture just says, well, what did you expect? Life sucks. That's how it goes. Look at grandma. She's worse off than you. So, but what's possible is to live life as Soma, and that is bit by bit, slowly. We don't want it to be too shocking because then we can't handle it. Too much energy. It's not too much energy. It's too much energy for us to channel and consistently in a good way. So we get all kind of ADHD and freak out. But we want to learn to regulate that. That's a big part of it. So I'm really trying to give you all of the juicy details so that you can be master self-practitioners of somatics, because it is very, 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 very important. Everybody on this planet needs this information. It should not be, this is a basic human right as far as I'm concerned. So I want you to have the experience. I don't want you to think that this is reserved for some special few. You can do it. Keep glimpsing what it is to be a Soma, just to have that buoyancy and that sense of competency and the sense of that time is actually for me, not against me. So notice when you have that sense of there's not enough time, that's like green light, green light, green light, green light. Not enough time, not enough time, not enough time. Gotta go, 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 go. So not enough time. I'm not enough. I can't. All of these things that are there to keep the status quo locked in place, steady decline. And we need to see that and realize that's not inevitable. That's a choice. And I can live life as Soma. And no matter how hard it is now, I have to remember now is the best time. Always, 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 always now, no matter what. Don't make this very seductive excuse of excusing putting it off because it's now always is the best time. Because if you're practicing inefficiencies, see, if you're in pain, that means you're practicing inefficiencies. You've got some very, very habitual inefficiencies that are so severe that they're producing pain. And that pain is there because it's like alarm bells going off. It's saying, pay attention. And you need to, but you didn't know how. So now you know how. You just tune into it as a Soma and you start to realize, oh, wow, that was crazy. I was doing that. Holy cow. So at first you don't even, this all sounds so crazy and wackadoodle, I know. But I promise you, it is so worth it. You keep on exploring and experiencing in this way, and you will find you are empowered, that your life is your creation. And if you experience, and the desire that you experience is not bad. The desire you experience is merely that buoyancy, and you just hadn't previously learned how to regulate well enough so that you could keep everything at the same pace, because you got to be able, you always have to remain buoyant. If you're trying to move forward and you can't remain buoyant, then you need to slow that down until you can, and do it many times until you can gain competency so that you can move forward and be buoyant. Why? Because the buoyancy should not go away. In fact, the buoyancy does not go away because you're moving forward. What's happening is that there are inefficiencies in how you're moving forward that are running counter to buoyancy, so actually pulling down, opposing buoyancy. They're inefficient, they're not necessary. In order to discover them, you have to slow down, live life as Soma, so you feel, wow, that feels so tight and numb and uncomfortable and weird there, and I'm just going to give my gentle light attention there, and noticing if I include that, if I don't try and do anything about it or fix it in any way, but I just include it in gently in my awareness of myself as a Soma, and just keep lightly holding that. Notice how it starts to really ripple out, and your whole sense of yourself really starts to change because, well, it is rippling out. It's beginning to manifest. It literally starts to manifest in the mind and body. But then what happens is we usually get distracted. Like, oh, Lee, you guys are so patient. I'm really going on. I'm going to wrap it up in the next minute. In fact, I'll wrap it up there. This was such a good session. A lot of really good information. So you take these pointers and work with them and play with it, make it fun, and remember that this is like, it's the best thing that you can do, because as a general practice, as far as I'm concerned, because you can just start to tune into life as Soma anytime, like the only thing is maybe if don't operate heavy machinery, I guess, because you want to just be on the safe side. Could you, eventually you want, the goal is to have enough investment in life as Soma to be anchored adequately in life as Soma, that you can operate heavy machinery at the same time and do it better than you'd ever have been able to do it otherwise. Because the level of refinement is there are very few mistakes. See, that's like, think about that. What if aging, instead of aging is decline, inevitable decline, what about this? Aging is the magnificent refinement of artistry, of storytelling, of painting, of sculpting, of gardening, and that's exciting. That like it's never too late. That everything that has come before is distilled into the essential lesson now, so that it catalyzes you into the next. That like all of this stuff, we don't need to get rid of it. We don't need to get rid of the memories. We don't need to do anything about that. All we need to do is just live life as Soma and allow all of that, and not get hung up on it, not cling to it, nor resist it. It's like, it comes, it goes. But I am life as Soma. I am experiencing the ultimate of what it is to be individuated at a fourth dimension. There's nothing superior available to me as a fourth dimensional being. See, once that's satisfied, that's why I'm saying that all the desires, they're really just there as an invitation to look, so that you can get even clearer, a clearer refinement on what it is to be a fourth dimension individuated self. And then you have a sense, there's like a mastery, okay? then you're ready for 5D. So it's exciting. It's that your life is art, and you can be playing that. You can be living your life as art with that kind of freedom and that kind of permission. Like, you're not a starving artist either, by the way. It's like you are a richly endowed artist. Like, the whole universe is your endowment. Like, that is the yeah, it's phenomenal. And this, I'll leave it at this, that the big, like the big, one of the big jokes is that that oneness expressed is still oneness. So we only have some weird idea in the stages of development. We perceive separation, and so we have to keep coming back to that fundamental recognition of oneness. But that's oneness, that's formless oneness. But what we haven't yet fully seen consciously is that oneness, we don't have to fear expression. We don't have to fear desire, because that desire is not bad. We learned that it was bad, but it's not bad. We can do weird things with it. But if we're true to it, and that's what life as Soma is, it's to be true to oneself, to be true to the Soma, which is this, to be developing mastery over the 4 dimensions, is then you are able to start to perceive with that kind of enthusiasm that life really is here for you, time is here for you, space is here for you, that all experience is for you, and that there is a divine perfection to all of it, and that you just are here to receive this lesson, which is fundamentally, it's just like, hey, here's an inefficiency. You don't need that, because we're just, if we have the wrong expectation, we won't have as good of experiences. So we want to have the right expectation. I could probably keep trying to set the right expectation for another hour, but I will spare you that. So thank you so much for joining. Blessings to you all. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.